All right, so welcome everybody. Can everybody hear me okay? I always like to check because at the beginning of the pandemic, I taught some classes where I was like partway into the class and people were like, we can't hear you. Let's see here. Yep, okay, great. All right, let me see if I can fix this camera angle a little bit. All right, so welcome everybody. Today we're going to do a sequence I call Quiet Yin. It doesn't mean we need to be quiet. It's just the name. And the reason it's called Quiet Yin is there's not really a particular focus for this particular practice. It's just kind of a well-rounded Yin class. You'll find a lot of my sequences have either an energetic or an anatomical focus. So it might be a muscle group. It might be several muscles. It might be joints, several joints. It might be meridians, but this is just sort of a well-rounded, it works the hips, it works the spine, it works all the yin meridians, okay? And it's just called Quiet Yin. So let's get right into it. We're going to start with the soles of feet together. And you have two options. One is to push your feet out. That's going to affect your spine more, your back more. The other is to pull your heels in close, which is going to affect your groin, the adductors more. Okay, so both are correct. You can choose the one that you prefer. And then we're going to be here for 5 minutes. Okay, now as always, if something doesn't feel right, if you think you might be hurting yourself for some reason, then just let me know. And then we'll take a look at the pose together. I might make some suggestions that you can try. Otherwise, you don't need to pull or push yourself into this. Just relax. You can use props. I'll get the props so I can show you what I mean by that. So standard complement of props would be one of these big pillows. It's called a bolster. If you don't have one of those, you could use a couch pillow, like a firm couch pillow. One or two of these blankets. These are from Mexico, but they're used at yoga studios. They're the standard, these Mexican blankets. And then a couple of blocks. Mine are made of cork, but a lot of them, most of them are usually made from styrofoam. And then maybe one of these straps, okay? Not saying you'll need all of those today, but it's not a bad idea to buy, if you don't have them at home, to buy a set of props. So a couple ways we can use the props in this particular posture is we could sit on something like this blanket, and that can push us forward a little more aggressively into the posture, if that's what we're looking for. We could have a block underneath our forehead to support the upper body if it feels a little too intense for us. Could also use blocks under the forearms like that. Just add a little bit of support there. And then finally, we could put something like this bolster and rest our body on that. All right, now anytime I mention props, I always mention that you can overdo it with the props. And I like to emphasize the difference between yin yoga and restorative yoga. So in restorative yoga, a lot of times you are trying to support the body. You're trying to make yourself very comfortable. In yin yoga, you might be uncomfortable because yin is a form of exercise. And so almost any time we're exercising the body, there is a level of discomfort that comes with it. If you are running, you might feel really good running, but there's still a level of discomfort with it. You might get used to it, but it is stressing the body. And it is the stress of exercise that makes our body healthier and stronger. So this isn't unique to yin yoga, but it's worth mentioning because a lot of people confuse yin yoga with restorative yoga. And they think, oh, I need to be like super comfortable and relaxed, and not necessarily. All right, you want to be safe, but not necessarily comfortable. All right, we've got just about a minute and a half left in this posture. Again, if you're having any trouble, just put something in the chat for me. Let me know, and I'll be happy to, again, figure out what's going on and hopefully make a suggestion that will help you. All right, so let's inhale as we come up, and we'll go right into our next posture. We'll take a rest after this next one. We want to take the legs straight and wide, and we come right down the center. So legs are pretty much as wide as they'll go, as straight as they can get. And I just relax my upper body forward and down. Now you can use all the props in the exact same way that you did in the first pose. So feel free to use them. All right, I'm not going to use any. And again, we just relax here for 5 minutes. And as we do that, the muscles in our back and the inside of our thighs stretch. The joints on the back side of our spine get pulled apart very gently. It stresses those joints and helps to make them stronger and healthier. And while you may not feel that while we're doing the pose, when we come back and rebound, when we're done with this posture, you might very well feel more sensitivity in your back than you do on the inside of your thighs. So it's very common for yin postures that while we're doing the yin postures, we feel more sensitivity in our muscles, more stretch in our muscles, and we don't really feel the joints. And then when we rebound afterwards, when we rest afterwards, we might feel it reverses, it flips, and we feel the joints very often more sensitive, and we don't feel the muscles anymore. everybody. So please take your time. You're going to come up and then just gradually make your way back onto your back. And we call that a rebound in yin. And even though it seems like an extra bit, like just a rest between the postures, like it's not part of the practice, right? It actually is a very important part of practice. Okay, so in yoga, sometimes things that seem like nothing or things that seem like they're extra to the yoga is actually the most important thing. So sometimes when a teacher says, follow your breath, that might seem like a very unimportant thing. And the important thing in the yoga is doing the postures, things like that. But actually, the more you learn about this stuff, you might find that actually that instruction to follow your breath is more important than any of the postures that you're doing. So the rebound, very important. We relax, we get still, we close our eyes, and we just allow ourselves to feel. Now, again, you might be feeling more in the joints of your spine than you are in that area that you're stretching your legs. It's a very common experience. And that's one of the reasons why we want to do the rebound. Okay, just allow ourselves to notice things like that. Okay, let's bring our legs in. We'll give them a little squeeze. That's called the leg cradle. And we use the leg cradle to bring relief to our body from the stresses that we were putting on it in those last postures. And then we will hinge down. This stabilizes the hips and the spine by engaging the rectus abdominis and the hip flexors. And then we just relax. Okay, and we'll move into our next posture, which is banana. So move your hips over to the right edge of your mat, like so. Take the left leg and move it to the left, and then cross the right ankle over the left ankle. Reach up, grab your right wrist with your left hand, and then pull your arm over to the left. Now, if you feel a stretch here, then you're good. If you don't, wiggle or scoot your upper body over until you feel a stretch in your side. Now, don't roll onto your left side. Okay, continue to face the ceiling with both your hips and your chest. Create a crescent or C shape. So if I were looking at you from above, I would see the letter C. You were spelling the letter C with your body. But you would still be facing me. You're still facing the ceiling. Once you're in position, there really isn't anything more to do, but just wait. The power of yin comes from time, not from intensity. So just relax. You don't have to think about anything in particular. You don't need to breathe in any particular way. Just give the pose some time. Just under 2 minutes left here. All right, let's gradually make our way over to the other side for banana pose side 2. So again, I'll move my hips over to the left edge of my mat. With my legs straight, I move my right leg over to the right. How far depends on, your body, your proportions, things like that. Crossing the left over the right ankle. Reach up, grab the left wrist, and that might be enough. You might already feel a stretch there. If you do, great. Just stick with that. But again, I'm not getting as much as I'd like, so I will wiggle myself over, just holding my little cap on here so I don't lose it. My hair is kind of in one of those awkward phases where it's too long, where it gets in my way, but it's also not long enough to put it back in any kind of reasonable way. So wearing something on my head usually helps. All right, so we're stretching that left side, maybe down in the hip, in the waist, the ribs, any of those sections or areas. Again, you can be quite aggressive with this pose. This pose doesn't tend to give people a lot of problems. Usually, if there is any trouble, it is in the arms, or sometimes there's a pinching on this side, the narrow side, not the lengthening side, but this side. So if either of those things come up for you, your arms hurt, or you feel pinching in your right waist, be sure to let me know. Otherwise, again, the beauty of yin is once we are in the poses, it's just time, just giving the pose time. And that time really works its magic on us. A little over halfway. All right, let's unwind once again. Coming back to neutral, we call that a rebound. We just relax and feel the effects of that practice on our body. And let's bring our legs in with a little squeeze. Shake it off, shake it out. And then this time we'll hinge up, okay? So we use the legs this time to pull us up to seated. Good. From there, let's move into a tabletop position. And we'll do a little bit of bear. So moving our hips and our spine, our neck and shoulders around a bit. So loosening things up, stretching things out. And then from there, you can do a little bit of down dog. Same idea, just pedaling out, stretching. And then from here, let's come forward onto our belly for what we call a sphinx. Okay, like so. Good. Now in sphinx, we want to be gently compressing our low back. Okay, so we want to feel a little bit of sensation back here. If I don't, then I have a few options. One is straightening my arms. That's called seal instead of sphinx. And I can even push myself back even further if that's appropriate. Another option is to prop myself up on something like that. Okay. Or I could, again, use something like a bolster to prop myself up as well. All right, so the key is just to go far enough so we feel a little bit of compression in our back. Now you have some options here, legs together or, maybe wide apart. Anywhere in between. Head held up or drop forward or drop back. shoulders depressed or relaxed. All of those will change what you feel to some degree, how easy the pose is, how challenging it is, where you feel the compression in your back. So experiment. Try some different things out. Make sure whatever it is you choose is within the range of what you feel or sense is safe for you to do today. Tomorrow it might be different. Tomorrow your body might open up more, maybe as a result of today's practice, and then you find that you can do more. Opposite could also be true. Tomorrow, for whatever reason, you might find that even though today you can go pretty far, tomorrow it doesn't feel safe to do so anymore. So we always want to honor our experience in the present moment and not force our body to do something that maybe it could do in the past, but for whatever reason, just on a given day, it's not wanting to do that. Okay. Okay. So gently bring yourself down onto your belly. You can rest your one hand on top of the other, your forehead on the back of the hands. It's called crocodile pose. Rest there for a moment. I'm going to set up some props to demo the next posture, and then we'll go over it together. All right. Next posture is probably the most challenging posture of this evening's class, but also a very therapeutic posture. It's called saddle pose. Now, again, props can be very useful. They're not essential, but they may be essential for you, meaning that you may find that you can't do a particular pose without certain props, all right? So that's why it's a good idea to invest in a set of yoga props. so that you'll have them just in case. Okay, go ahead and come back into a tabletop. You could do a little bit of bear pose there. And while you stretch out, I'll demo this next posture, the options that we have for this posture. So this is called saddle pose. Now I can sit on my heels or I can sit between them. I'm sitting between them. All right, my toes can point back or out to the sides. And the two areas that tend to give people trouble are the feet and ankles and the knees. All right, so if my feet hurt, I can put a blanket underneath them. If my ankle hurts, I can roll a blanket and put it underneath the ankle joint. My knees hurt, I can try taking them wider, or I can try sitting on a block. Okay. Now, if I don't need any of those things, I'm not going to use them, because once again, this is not about being uber comfortable or anything like that. I want to use the props for safety mostly. Not that I'm trying to make myself uncomfortable, I'm not. But I don't really use the props just for comfort. Okay, now I want to see, do I feel a stretch in the front of my thighs here? If I do, I'm just going to stay here and let them stretch, because that's a very therapeutic and beneficial and important stretch. If, however, I do not feel the stretch, then I take myself to my hands. I can lower back onto my elbows, and then I can recline back onto this bolster if I have one. Now you'll see that I propped it up, and that's generally if I have the least amount of flexibility, this might be where I am, and I can take this blanket and do this. All right, and that's really comfy. Now again, I'm really comfortable here. I could stay here all night lounging like this, all right? But I'm not really getting much benefit. I'm talking about me personally. You might be getting plenty of benefit there, but I'm not, because I'm not really stressing my body. So first thing I would try is I would get rid of this block. And then that brings me down to here. Now I'm beginning to feel more. So I feel more in my back. So I could stay here. I'd probably get plenty of back bend. But I know just from experience that I like coming all the way back. All right, like this. Now, if you are doing this, what I'm doing, laying all the way back on your back, that does not make you a better yogi. It's not that the further back we go, the better we are. And I think that's worth mentioning, because many people, especially people who are newer to yoga, but even some yoga teachers get this wrong. They think that yoga is about, doing the hardest version of a pose, and the harder versions we can do, the better we are at yoga. If that's my understanding of yoga, then I basically turn yoga into a form of gymnastics. All right? And you can do that, but that isn't the yoga that they're talking about in books like the Bhagavad Gita or the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. That isn't the spiritual yoga. Yoga in a spiritual sense is really about the self, understanding the self, the true nature of the self. And we might think we know who we are, what we are, right? If I say, what are you? Who are you? You might say, I'm Douglas. I'm a man. I'm a human. I'm this many years old, all this kind of stuff. It's understandable that you would think that. That's what everybody thinks. That's what you're being told, right? Every day, people come up to you and say, hey, Douglas, you know, this and that. You're a man, do this, try this, do that. Whatever it is. All right, or in your case, maybe you're a woman. So, if we don't question that, then we live a very ordinary life. And there's nothing wrong with that. Except that generally, that life will have either some, if not a lot, of suffering in it. All right? Suffering. If you like suffering, then no problem. But I think I could actually define suffering as, you know, that which we don't like, that which we resist. So, is there a way of avoiding that suffering? Is there an option to opt out of that suffering? What the yogis and Taoists and sages of ancient times have said, even Christian mystics, if you read them in the right way, what you find is they said, yes, there's a way to live a human life free of suffering, not pain. Physical pain is just a part of life. It's one of the colors, you might say, of life. But suffering, what we call psychological suffering, that's different. That's optional. We don't have to have that. But here's the rub. Here's the hard part about it. If you conceive of yourself as a human body, or you identify with your thoughts and your emotions, suffering is built into that. And in yoga, that's called the false self, the false sense of identity. We've mistaken who we really are for this little thing. And as long as I think I'm this little thing, I'm going to be very scared about the well-being of this little thing, this little piece of meat that we call Douglas, right? And these feelings and emotions and thoughts that arise in my experience. When I understand what yoga calls our true nature, when I can really see myself as that true nature, then suffering stops. But I no longer am identified as just this anymore. All right, let's go ahead and unwind. Take your time. So I think there's some phrases or quotes in the Bible where, you know, Jesus is talking about, you know, what we need to sacrifice to enter the kingdom of heaven. And, you know, there's things like you must give up, you know, this and that and all this kind of stuff. And people hear that and they get very nervous about, you know, oh God, I need to like give away my stuff. And it's accurate in a sense that you have to lose everything. You have to lose everything. And I'm not talking about your stuff, your physical stuff. I'm talking about your identity, even your body, even your mind. You have to lose all of that stuff in order to enter the kingdom of heaven, to enter what Buddha called nirvana, right? To find your true nature, what in yoga is called your true nature. And when we find this stuff, we no longer suffer. So that's the trade-off. We have to lose ourselves, our small sense of self, to find our true self. And in finding our true self, we let go of suffering. All right, let's bring our legs in, give them a little squeeze, shake it out. And then we will take a twist to finish. So right knee over left and knees drop down to the left. And this is called twisted roots. Feel free to play around with your leg and arm and head and neck position. Twists, obviously twists the spine, but they also stretch the muscles that are in and attached to the torso. So the chest, arm, upper arm, I should say, back, waist, abdomen, and hip, as well as the neck and shoulders can all be affected in spinal twists like this one. So the reason I brought that up is, again, the yogi who thinks, oh, you're doing this really deep posture, or you're able to bind in this posture, or oh, look, you can do handstand. And if they think that that's advanced yoga, they're very much mistaken. All postural yoga is beginner's yoga. Now, this isn't to say that there isn't advanced yoga postures. There are. And I'm glad that there are. They can be very useful learning tools. They can be very useful things to help us on our journey. But if we start getting confused and thinking that, oh, because Doug can lower all the way back in saddle pose, he's more advanced than me, and one day I need to lower back in saddle pose in order for me to advance in yoga, then I'm just very confused about the nature of yoga. And again, unfortunately, there are many people who are confused today, at least in this country. And partly that's just due to the low standards of what it takes to become a yoga teacher. And now I'm not putting anybody down here, okay? I'm not trying to anyway. I'm not naming any names. I'm not saying, oh, this teacher's bad or that teacher's bad. I'm just basically stating a fact that 200 hours to call yourself a yoga teacher is really not enough. I'm not saying you couldn't start teaching after 200 hours, but really to talk about and to understand and to teach the things I'm talking about, again, letting go of our personal identity, letting go of suffering. And I'm talking about this in a very real sense. This isn't theoretical. Some of you might be thinking I'm talking about some kind of like cosmic, thing that happens to Buddhist saints, but it can't happen to us. I'm not talking in the abstract. I'm talking very concrete, very real experiences that we can have in this life. Through these tools, not just the postures, all right, but the postures are one tool amongst many. By using these tools in the right way, with the proper guidance by a teacher, we can let go of our psychological suffering and live the rest of our lives in a very different way. And this is why in spirituality, you find this relatively common term that's used, which is, in yoga, it's called twice born. And this might ring a bell to anyone who lives in the United States, right? We have what are called born again Christians. Now, again, that's sort of now identified as like a group of people. And, it's even gotten kind of political. But that sense of being born again, born anew, what it's saying from a spiritual, and I'm talking pan-spirituality now, so I'm not talking about born-again Christians, right? Because again, in yoga, we have this term, twice born. What this is pointing to, or what this is telling us, is that we all have a physical birth. Our mother gave us that. She gave birth to us. We're here physically. But we, as human beings, have the potential for a second birth. And this is given to us by our teacher or guru. Okay? Now, again, guru, teacher, whatever, I don't really care too much about what term you use. All right, let's switch sides. So we come back through center and left knee over right, and we drop the knees down to the right this time. So this is relevant. I have been teaching yoga a long time. I have many students who I work with, and many students are reaching out to me these days because they find the pandemic very stressful. And one of the reasons we find the pandemic stressful is our small sense of self, which I usually refer to as the ego. Okay, and it's not the same as Freud's ego, id, superego, all that stuff. So don't get too wrapped up, again, in terminology. Try and understand what I'm referring to, rather than trying to bring some kind of different definition in. The ego is your small sense of self, your separate sense of self. One of the ways that the ego tries to give itself a false sense of security is by telling itself it knows what the future will bring. Right? So a very basic version of this is, I have a good job, so therefore I don't have to worry about money. I know where I will be living. I know where I will be sleeping in the future. Okay, that's one version of that. So what happens? Worldwide pandemic happens, and people start losing their jobs. Well, if I derive my sense of security from this idea that, well, I have a job and I know where I'm going to be sleeping and I know I'm going to have enough money, all of a sudden that begins to come into question, right? And then my small sense of self begins to feel threatened. So the pandemic has been a very powerful spiritual teacher, because it's removing these things that the ego usually uses to try and derive its sense of security. Things like jobs, things like, I'm healthy, or I'm going to live a long time, or my loved ones are safe. And again, I am not talking in the abstract and simply theoretically. Some of you know that my father passed away very recently due to COVID-19. He caught it, and he was in the hospital for about 2 weeks. We talked a lot, shared a lot in that time, and then he passed away. And while it was a sad event for me, it wasn't one that put me out of commission. I was able to teach yoga that night. I was scheduled to teach, and I was able to fulfill that. And interestingly, through my father's passing, I've been able to share that with many students, and they were able to get something from that experience. And so this is what not being so identified with our small sense of self and not being afflicted with that normal kind of psychological suffering allows us to do. It allows us to turn something that is an inevitable tragedy. It couldn't have been avoided. It just is what it is. It allows us to turn that into something that we can learn and grow from, and even find beauty in. I've had two people relatively close to me who passed away recently. One was a student, and another is my father. One was due to cancer, and my father was, of course, COVID. And again, while I would love to have them both back, part of my life, each of them in their passing have given gifts and have taught lessons that have been so valuable that would have been easy to miss, again, if we're just too caught up in the tragedy of it and the sadness of it, and we're overwhelmed by our own grief and sadness. All right, let's unwind from this. So this is the power of yoga. This is what I always try and educate students about. This is the power of this path if we choose to walk it. And again, I need to emphasize, doing these postures are a very small part of that. It can be an important part of it, but it's a small part, and it's not even an essential part. There are other things that are much more essential to getting rid of our suffering than doing these postures. But the postures can be a very powerful and important part of it. All right. Let's bring our legs in, give them a little squeeze, shake it out, a little bit of movement. And then let's take our relaxation on our back. Now, I want to be clear when I talk about these kinds of things that, again, I have no interest in putting anybody down. Sometimes people hear me talking this way and they think I'm trying to insult other people or put down other yoga teachers. I have no interest in doing that. I see myself as an educator. And so I'm just trying to educate my audience about the true nature of yoga. And the reason I do this is because I've experienced for myself, and I've shared with many students over the years, the true power of yoga. And if we turn yoga into gymnastics or just a workout, then we're really diminishing what yoga is really about, what yoga can do for us. All right? So I'm not saying that yoga can't make you fit. I'm not saying yoga can't help you heal your body. I'm not saying that you can't have fun doing yoga. What I'm saying is yoga can do so much more. So what I'm really trying to do for my students is say, set your sights higher. Expect more from yoga and your yoga teacher. And if they don't deliver more, then maybe look for a different kind of yoga. Look for a different kind of teacher. All right? Because yoga really can, I can say, cure the problem of suffering. This is what Buddha set out to do. He wanted to discover the cure to suffering, and he found it, and he shared it. And you could say that Buddhist practices are one form of yoga. Different spiritual traditions talk about this in different ways. Again, Buddha called it nirvana. Jesus called it the kingdom of heaven. There are many names for this end to our personal suffering. In yoga, it's, again, sometimes called self-realization. Doesn't matter what we call it. We're really talking about the same thing. All right, everyone. So I'm going to leave you to do your relaxation in silence for the next few minutes. You might want to set a timer, but if you don't have anywhere to go, just relax for at least 6 minutes and maybe longer. Again, these are stressful times, so if you feel that you need a hand, let me know. Reach out. I'm happy to talk with you virtually or in person, outdoors somewhere. Yoga has many tools for us to use. And again, these can be really challenging times, which is as much of a blessing as it is a curse when we see it from a spiritual perspective. Namaste, everyone. Please take care of yourselves. And hopefully I'll see you next week. 4:45 is flow. If you can join me for that, that would be great. And as usual, 6 o'clock is Yin Yoga. Namaste.